to episode 4 of Chewing the Cud. I'm Andrew Jones.
And Neil Greggor. We're here to chat a little bit about agriculture. But today, I'm going to interview Andrew so we can get to know him a little bit better, get a few ideas from what his experiences are and what he's experienced around the world, and hopefully learn something from you, Andrew.
Good luck.
Right. So I'm looking forward to hearing about the experiences that you've had over the last 2 or 3 decades.
How long you got? Because I know I could probably just keep talking
and
talking if you get me going.
Well, let's start. We have discussed this in the last, but you grew up in the Frome area.
Yeah. So I born and bred up in just outside Frome, so North Somerset. For anybody that's not familiar with Frome, initially would have been 120 acre farm, 60 cows, probably about 5,000 broilers. And then when we sold the business, my parents, my father sold the business back in 97. We probably owned 200 acres, farming 300 at about 150 cows, doing, what were they doing? About 7,000 litres average, I think. But we were starting to get the first ones doing 8.5, wow. And I think more. I remember we had the first of 3 years worth of Aerostars carve in, and one of the heifers did 35 litres on the first recording. So we were moving forward. I guess we were getting to that second cross of Holstein, and that's when they always said you got that big jump, wasn't it?
Yes,
the second
that's
cross.
Right. Yeah.
And
bit of a confusing cross because they went everywhere. But
yeah. Well, I mean, we had some lieutenants as heifers that we sold, which they could go everywhere. But as I found out later in life, the lieutenants that were left were bloody good cows.
That's right, absolutely.
But you had to wheedle the good cows out from the bow.
You did.
And then 21,000 broilers. So that's where I grew up. As I mentioned before, wasn't originally going to go dairying or farming. Went to do something completely different, and then decided I missed cows, so went to ag college and gone from there.
And went on farming. Then obviously your parents decided to immigrate to Australia.
Yep.
And dragged you along with them.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm told, my mother revealed she wanted to do it for years, but we went over in 1982 for a family wedding. My uncle went over and married an Aussie, and we travelled. And after that, so my parents wanted to go to Oz. I believe they were looking at doing it in about 83, immediately after they came back. Sold up and gone sort of thing. But I think milk quotas came in and put a bit of a kibosh on that. But what is also interesting though is the farm that I grew up on. When we did emigrate to Australia, we were actually the 3rd family that we knew of that had left that farm and emigrated to Australia.
Oh, that's amazing.
I know. You wouldn't believe it, would you? It's almost like, particulars you should put, warning, you may end up in Australia.
Beware.
Beware. Because my grandparents brought it in the mid-60s from a family that went over as £10 pods. One of the reasons they left is they had 4 boys, and they didn't think they would ever have a farm big enough for 4 boys. Well, as it was, they had over 1,000 acres on the Darling Downs, and only 1 son was on the farm because it couldn't support 4 sons.
Anyway.
And then you go back to a family that left, I believe, early 1900s, and we did know them, did see them around. They were down, I've forgotten where the name place, down somewhere mid New South Wales, and they were dairy farmers. But the funny thing is, every generation of that family comes back to see where they come from. So my grandparents met one, my parents met them, and then the next generation, and then the current owners have met the next generation. And I think they invited, because my sister knows the current owners, invited them to come over and talk about it as well. So every generation at some point comes back to the UK, comes back to the farm that they left it was like late 1800s, early 1900s, to see where the family originated from. And they've shown some pictures around that time of, what the face looked like, or the house looked like at the time, which has been fascinating.
Incredible, yeah.
I know, you wouldn't believe it.
Deep in history, that's for sure.
Definitely, definitely.
Right, so you ended up farming in Australia.
Yeah.
And how many did you milk?
Depends where I was. Obviously, went to ag college. Parents decided they're going to emigrate to Australia. Yeah. I wasn't going to join them. Oh no, I'll rephrase that. Sorry. I was having left uni after 2 years. I wanted to finish my diploma, a national diploma in agriculture, and my parents left at the end of the second year when I was doing my year out, and I wanted to finish. So, because I had to trigger my visa, and I wanted to finish the course, so that third year I had to leave to trigger my visa. So I went over for literally 3 weeks during my third year to trigger my visa, because I had to trigger my visa within a year of application, but I wasn't allowed to do it till after my father had triggered his, because he was the main one, because we were going on a business visa. He wouldn't leave it till the very last minute, so I couldn't have done it in the summer, which would have been the ideal time to do it. So went over with them 3 weeks, looked at a couple of farms. I remember one, we went to, parents saw and advertised, let's go look at it. The people who were staying with you happened to be the family who went out as £10 poms. They said, oh, it's only up the road. Okay, no worries. So we jumped in the car. 5 hours later, we got there. And anyway, so looked around a few, and then basically said to them, the last thing I said to them is, don't buy a farm until I get back. Till I come back. I was going to finish my year at college and then come out. And then while I was, and they spent then that next year basically travelling up and down the eastern seaboard of Australia, and staying like those friends when they needed a base. And then I get a phone call. It was around, I reckon, the Easter time of, what that been, 1998. Oh, we've brought a property. You what? Says me. Oh no, we brought a property.
As agreed.
Yeah. We brought a property up in far north Queensland. So for those that don't know, as the locals call it, FNQ. FNQ is basically anything north of sort of Rockhampton, if I remember right. So we were just outside Cairns on what is probably at the time was the biggest tropical dairy area in the world. There's about 200 farms. So we were just outside a place called Milla, which means much wet. Anything repeated in an Aboriginal word, I'm told, means much of, so much wet. And yes, when you know how much it rained, because it was tropical rainforest.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the property had only been cleared 10 years ago, and quite frankly should never have been cleared based on the topography and whatever, or 10 years before we had it. And yeah, so we got North Queensland in the tropics. Definitely an experience in its own right. I don't know. Yeah, an experience is all I can say. The average rainfall before we got there was 103 inches in the nearest township.
Yeah.
Milla. The first 2 years we were there were the wettest wet seasons in a generation. I think we had 200 inches of rain, and if you're listening to this, yes, that is correct. 200 inches of rain. We had a tropical cyclone come through the first year, which was Cyclone Rona, and that was, stopped measuring at one point, but it was 32 inches in 2 days. I got to 20 inches the first day and had emptied the pot. Only did 10 inches at halfway through, before I went to bed, and it was full again by the next morning. So we certainly had 32 inches, and there's pictures of me on a creek crossing, which usually be around your ankles, and was up round above my waist. And for those that don't know you, I'm 6'6" tall, or 2 meters tall. And yeah, so quite
fair amount of water.
Yeah, fair amount of water. And if we hadn't got the cows when we had about midday that day, because the creeks literally came up in front of your eyes, we wouldn't have got them back for a few days.
Yeah.
But then a few days later, all you had left was some washed down fences, and that was it. All went down the coast, flooded the coast out.
Yeah.
Because of the topography of where we were. It was fine.
Nothing stopped the runoff then. No. Yeah, amazing. And then, Andrew, we spoke once about sort of some of the problems that you had when dairy farming, and you spoke about frogs.
Cane toads.
Cane toads.
Yeah. I think I just hadn't answered your original question on numbers.
Yeah.
When we got to North Queensland, it was 1,000 acres, 300 cows, and in our time there, we brought the neighbouring block, so it was about 1,200 acres, I think it was. Doubled the numbers up to 600 cows, built a 50-point rotary. Feeding them was interesting because if you wanted bulk feed, you couldn't make silage because there wasn't enough sugars in the tropical grass for it to ferment. So you either had whole cottonseed or bagasse, which is the waste from sugar cane, or peanut hay. For anybody that's never seen peanut hay, it just looks like the twigs after you've been with the hedge cutter along the hedges. That's really what it looks like, but they love it. They absolutely go for it.
Good father.
Well, I mean, especially with the peanuts left in it.
And
what a lot of people may not realise is peanuts actually grow underground.
Yeah.
And a lot of people seem to realise that, but they love it. But so, and molasses was as cheap as chips, so because obviously the sugarcane factories, because down on the coast there was all the sugarcane, and so you just ad lib fed molasses.
Yeah.
But yes, cane toads. Going back to cane toads. Yes. Yes. For those that don't know, Australia, as I just mentioned, grows a lot of sugarcane up on the east in the tropics, and they had a problem with the sugarcane grub. Was it grub? I think it is. And apparently, was it Puerto Rico or Costa Rica, somewhere like that? The way that they have a natural predator, which is a cane toad. Mm-hmm. So back in, I think it was the 60s, they released a few cane toads up, I think, Gordonsville, just outside Cairns, so not too far from where we lived, sort of hour and a half, 2 hours away. They thought, hey, this is great. These will eat the grubs. Job sorted. No. Cane toads went, why am I going to eat a grub that's sort of 3 foot off the ground where I can eat all these vermin, whatever, on the ground? Yeah. So that's what they did. And they just grew and grew and grew and grew. And the problem is that they have no predator. They have poisonous glands on their backs, so anything that eats them will die. So there isn't, and I certainly remember when I was there was worries that they were starting to hit the Northern Territory. They spread into most of, certainly central and Queensland, down, possibly a bit further. They were starting to hit into the Territory, as Northern Territory, worried about them hitting like national parks like Kakadu, etc., and what devastation have on the wildlife, because it does just kill. Yeah. It will eat small animals, and nothing will kill it, so it just... population explosion. And I mean, I remember some friends came over in 99, I think it was, and they couldn't believe the conversation. So you had Triple J, which is I guess the equivalent of Radio 1, was like, okay, Queenslanders, it's just hit the border in the Northern Territory, ring up and tell us how the people in the Northern Territory should control the cane toad. The most humane way, shall I say, of controlling the cane toad is you catch them, you put them in the freezer and you freeze them. They die. Cane toads are a bit of a sport, shall we say, in North Queensland. I even knew when we first got there was a lady milking the cows, and her teenage daughters went out hunting cane toads. Right. They went out hunting cane toads with aerosols and lighters and burnt them. I knew people that played golf with them, cricket with them. Oh dear. Okay, I'm sorry, not maybe the most humane way of destroying these animals. Yeah. But these animals were a pest. Yeah. To the point that I remember the first year we got there, before we had the big rain, you could drive up the laneways on the farm and they were just covered in cane toads. Yeah. Just covered at dawn and dusk, covered in canes. You literally so you couldn't not avoid them. So you just used to drive up and you just hear this pop, 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 pop as you run over them, and obviously they would... Well, there were so many of them. It just
made no difference.
It made no difference. You just and be honest, they were a pest.
Yeah.
So
unfortunately, they need to be controlled.
Yes, very much so. Very much so. Yeah. That was definitely a case. So I guess you could argue, just like rabbits were in Australia and introduced. Species that wreaked havoc with the native environment.
That's right. This is the problem. We knock the balance out then, don't we?
Very
Instead
much
of solving the problem itself. And
Yeah.
we,
Yeah.
Oh dear. Right. Well, after you'd finished dairy farming in Australia, you came back to us.
You missed a step out there, I'm afraid.
I did?
Oh, you did, yeah. Obviously, I was in North Queensland for 6 years.
Yes.
But then we...
Of course, you moved to Noni.
moved to Victoria, yeah. Decided it was too wet, which most people are like, what? As I just said, 100 inches a year average rainfall. Even when
covered
we
in
moved...
frogs.
Yeah, and ticks, and leeches, and snakes, and stinging trees. So we decided it was too wet, and even when we got to Victoria, people were like, well, you moved down here because it's wetter. No, because we're trying to get away from the wet. They couldn't believe it themselves. So we moved to Western Victoria, just outside a little place called Camperdown, which about 3 hours west of Melbourne Airport. There's a double avenue of trees through the middle of it, which I didn't recognise the trees. I'm thinking, I don't recognise them. Went and had a look. They were elm trees.
Wow.
Dutch elm disease had not hit
Australia,
so they had a double row of elm trees. Now, all I remember of elm trees over here was obviously Dutch elm hit early 70s, mid 70s.
Right. Yeah.
Was just a load of dead trees around the farm that had been elm trees that because of Dutch elm disease my father had to cut down, and they'd just been left where they were until such time as we needed it for the firewood. Then they'd be cleared, but there just wasn't room to make a huge pile of it, sort of thing. So all I remember was dead. All I remember was dead trees around the farm as a child, or cut down trees, and they were elm trees. Whereas this had a double row of elm trees. So we're in North.
Home from home.
So we were in Western Victoria because of some of the genetics I'd got into. I didn't want to lose them, so we actually moved 500 head from North Queensland to Western Victoria. That was 200 milkers and 300 young stock, that was an experience in itself, getting them across tick borders, etc. For anyone that doesn't know, that's a distance of about 2,000 miles, which, looking at a map here and now, I've looked at it, that would basically be taking cattle from here to Turkey. It's just, you wouldn't do it.
No.
You just wouldn't do it.
No, you wouldn't do that to yourself.
No, you wouldn't. It's madness. But we did it. We did it. And the worst thing is, of course, for people who don't know, it's not all of Queensland, but probably central Queensland up has got ticks, and you get a few ticks here, but you vaccinate for tick fever. Sometimes that doesn't work. You have to, during tick season, which was November through to about January, you have to treat them every 3 weeks, whether it's plunge dip or a pour on or a spray race. But it's not just you can also get paralysis ticks, which can certainly kill a calf or a dog because they I think they affect the heart muscles, but they're called paralysis ticks because they lose the use of their back limbs. And so you've got to do it, but to prevent the spread you have to cross a tick border, so you have to plunge them through a full plunge dip. Was it 5 days before they cross the tick border, 5 to 7 days before they cross the tick border? Then they have to be inspected at the tick border, and then plunged again, and then they're allowed to move through. However, if they fail, they have to be plunged, spelled for 5 to 7 days, inspected, plunged again, and then got through. The problem is if you had milkers that failed, the nearest dairy farm was several hundred miles away, so you'd have to, at your expense. And we actually had one bunch of in-calf heifers that failed. I'm told it was literally the last animal they found a live tick on.
Oh.
It wasn't even a dead tick, it was a live tick, so we had to plunge them, they had to be spelled and then move through. But
fortunately heifers then. So
but the downside to that tick thing is when we got to the property there was a plunge dip, which is basically like a giant sheep dip. and you've seen photos
Yes.
of it, and it's unbelievable what you've got to do. And you look back and think, what was I so stupid for at times? But it was basically it was a plunge dip, and over the years, less and less chemicals have become available for you to use, which has happened with everything.
Yes.
And there was only one chemical that was still licensed on milking animals. We only used it the first year for heifers, and then we used a pour on for everything else until we built the dairy. We built a spray race.
Yeah.
But they always said if you close a plunge dip, you've got to mark it so that everyone knows where a plunge dip has been. And you sort of, why?
Yeah.
But anyway, so before we hadn't used the plunge dip for 5 years, and before we used it, we tested to see what the strength of it was before we started using it again. And we tested it, and it was still at half strength after 5 years. That's why you had to mark it, was because it had a half-life of 5 years. So to get it down to, you're going to have to wait, if it's 5 years, you're going to be waiting 50 plus years to get to nothing. What got me is the poor animals, the way to mix it up was you had to run half a dozen animals through, put them through it, and then have to go round again. So these ones had they had to go round twice. But I say, stupid thing was, and I look back, but you don't want the animals sliding in. You had to make them jump, and occasionally some would slide in and end up upside down, and you don't want them to drown.
No.
So the person on the back gate has to shut the gate. There's always a lasso, a rope there.
Yep.
If they turn upside down, they lasso their heads, pull their heads out of the
yeah.
water so that they couldn't drown. Because this is a 6 foot deep plunge.
Yeah.
dip.
Yeah.
But the thing was, to get them out, what I used to have to do was shimmy alongside the inside of the plunge dip with only a board to hang on to, which could have broken any time, and I could have ended up in with it. So health and safety, yay! Didn't think about it at the time.
No.
You go along about halfway, they'd throw you the rope, you grab the rope, shimmy back out along the side of the plunge dip, and then at the end you then pull.
As
They were
quickly as
sort of
possible.
struggling, but you were helping guide them in the right direction, so you were then pulling them out, take the rope off, and then they'd be fine. Never lost one, but it was. You look back now and think, well, what could I have ended up in if that had broken?
You wouldn't have had ticks on for a while.
Well, no, definitely wouldn't have had ticks for us. So anyway, went to Western Victoria. When I got there, we were milking just over 1,000. I think we were about 1,050 in total. There was a 50-point rotary on the farm. I think the most we ever milked was 934 in one milking.
On a rotary
On
pond.
a 50 rotary. So I spent probably most of the 10 years in Oz on a rotary. I like a rotary. And then, so that was 2,000 acres in total. 1,200 on the home block, 400 out block, and then we rented some other bits and pieces. About 2,000 in total. So about 1,000. But then when I took over, because there were share farmers there originally, I cut it back to about 800 cows. And then we went through the drought in 2007. It was good because I turned that farm when we took it over was about 800 cows, because obviously we brought our 200 odd cows and lifted the numbers because we were told it would cope with more cows. But they were doing about 3 million litres off 800 cows. By the time I left 4 years later, we were doing, was it over 5.5 million or 770 cows? So more than almost double production with actually less cows.
Animals. Yeah.
But as I say, got into some of the genetics and.
Yeah, tell me a bit about that, because I know you've got a champion cow.
Yeah, I do. I always thought if I'm going to milk cows, I might as well milk the best cows I possibly can. So I started buying some cows. The very first animal I brought was the Phyllises from Colin and Shelley Daly at Our Way Holsteins. Hi, if you're listening. And they were a lovely family. Very black. Very, very consistent family. I knew someone that knew the family when it started, and he said I didn't like them because they were too inconsistent. Well, obviously they bred some consistency into them.
Yes.
But then I got into the Nonis. They were probably the highest ranking family at the time in Australia. It was the the Raider Noni was number 1, her dam, the Tab, was number 2, and then various daughters or sisters to the Raider were then. And I just managed, I got our local CMEX rep to make contact. And yeah, just sort of a bit to and fro, and I brought this, the Rudolph Noni. And yeah, what a great cow she was. Properly a great cow. I'd always wanted a Rudolph, and I went and brought the best one in the country, basically. Yeah. Paid, 10 grand for her. But she was worth it.
And you got a Shottle out of her eventually. That's
the granddaughter, that's the one you're talking about. But then obviously I've got into others. So for anybody, I became a bit of a collector of pedigrees. So I had Roxy's and Gaieties and Laurie Sheiks and what else did I have? Fairies from Pengate, or Finesses from Pengate. What's it? The Startmore Raquel. Is it? Yeah, the Raquels. Is it from Startmore?
Yeah.
That Rudolph went back to. I just became. I don't know. I'll have to go get a list maybe one day. But there was. I became a bit of a collector. But yes, but that Rudolph bred her for a couple of bull contracts.
Yep.
One of those matings was Morty. We flushed her and got a bull and a heifer. The bull went in to AI. Only one I ever sold on a royalties contract, and the little wouldn't produce any semen, so that was the end of that. But she also had a Boss Iron son that went into AI. I tested an outside son myself, and she also had a Blitz son that went into AI. And his genomics, he didn't come back in Oz, but his genomics were as good as the ones that were starting to get proven in the US, which is a real shame. I can't. Was it Blade Master? Was he a Blitz son or something? Something
Blade,
like that. Blade, was it Blade? Was he out of the Barbies? Yes, it would have been.
No. Blitz and Blade were both Emery sons, but
there was another one I think out of the Barbies that was a Blitz son. I can't remember what his name is now. And I remember, because I'd used Blade, and his genomics were as good as what their previous one was, and you're like, that could have been something if it'd been elsewhere. But anyway, so out of the Morty, so the Rudolph eventually went excellent, and then I bred out of her a Morty, which she went excellent. And as we both know, Mortys, they could be absolute pigs or real good. Because I remember having an 81 point heifer Morty, and she never went any better and was never going to go any better. Whereas this one was an 85 point heifer, and she went on.
Boy, when
they
were good, they were good.
They were good, exactly. And then from her first daughter was a Shottle. Who I've since found out was the oldest Shottle in Australia. I didn't realise at the time. But so I've been chasing. We didn't get semen over there for 9 months after the UK, and I'd been chasing him for a little bit because you could see he looked quite interesting. And actually her Boss Iron sister was put to Shottle, but unfortunately she lost the pregnancy. So real shame. Could have been interesting. So obviously bred her. She went on as an 85 heifer. I sold her when she was 2.5-year-old as an 85 point heifer for $33,000, which at the time we think was the 5th highest price paid for a milking animal in Australia. But obviously she went on to do some interesting things. Hello to Roger and Helen Perrott at Hill Valley if they're listening. They obviously won International Dairy with her and was champion cow in 2012 for them. I'm told they had a joint Australian-Canadian bid. I know who the Aussie was. I'd love to know who the Canadian was for $120,000, and they turned it down. And that's some big money.
That is.
That's some very big money. They cloned her, so she's got 2 full clones. And then in 2020... she was announced as Australian Cow of the Year. I believe she's still alive. She was born in 2006.
Wow.
So she'd be 16.
Yeah.
Wouldn't surprise me because the Rudolph lived to 15. The Tab lived till she was about 13 or 14. So there's longevity in the family.
In that family, that's for sure.
What I understand is though she's just dry and used for IVF program now, and why not?
Sure.
I mean,
exactly.
For an animal like that, why not? And I believe she was then third generation excellent, because the Morty went excellent as well, and because she went 92, I think, max as a third carver.
Right.
She's now 92 4E, and then she's now got, I believe, she's got daughters that are excellent, and I believe one of those daughters has now got an excellent daughter, so there's now a fifth generation excellent out of that family, so it's not bad.
Outstanding.
Not bad going at all. So so that's my, I guess,
quite an achievement. Your Australian adventure.
So I mean, if you Google her, you've just got to search Page House Shottle Noni, you'll find
all the information on her.
Plenty about her. But I mean, I just. Yeah, I mean, a few people sort of said, because that's right, I then inseminated her to Oman and sold an Oman out of her as a 3-month-old calf for $10,000. And a few people I remember at sales said, oh yeah, no, but a couple of people have told, AI companies told us that you'd done that under contract to them. No, it wasn't. It was, I'm thinking, well, let's just keep putting the health traits in there with Shottle in there, with Rudolph in there,
exactly.
And they then started genomically testing animals just after I left Australia. I think CMEX running around doing it, and I think the Shottle ended up the highest genomic milking animal in Australia at that point. And then they tested the Oman, and if I'm right, and I think she ended up like top 100 in the world. I think she had a TPI at the time of 2025.
Right.
She had an Oman with type, given what was behind her, and Omans didn't have type.
No.
I think she was over 3 for type or something.
Wow.
I think, I'm not sure what happened entirely. I think they tried to flush her, and then it's made a bit of a mess, unfortunately.
Oh dear.
So then when she did carve, it was late, and of course this all affects things. So she, that's not bad going. 2025
Certainly
at
not.
that time was pretty good going. So it was.
Oh, fantastic, Andrew! It's just a lovely feeling to have bred something like that.
Oh yeah, I mean,
it's just
at one point she was probably the best cow in the Southern Hemisphere.
That is really something.
It is. You got me talking about it now, but I probably talk about it less and less now. But you walk up the top of our stairs, and there is the Holston International 2012 picture of champions around the world, and there's the Shottle.
There she is. I've seen the picture of her. She's an exceptional cow.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's framed and up on the wall, and it will forever be up on the wall because it's a hell of an achievement.
It is, of course it is. It's lovely that you did it with Shottle that came from England. That always tickles me.
But just remember, it was an Italian bull side, and then a Canadian bull, and then a Canadian bull. Yeah, exactly.
Canadian mother, and it just shows you as international cow.
Well, I remember you saying that. I think it was the local CMEX rep said he tried to get the boss of CMEX to come and have a look, and initially he was like, "Oh, we're not interested in Shottle," or something like that. And then it's like, no, you're in your area, come and have a look at this before she carved. I mean, someone from Genus had seen her before she carved and just called her an absolute peach. And he came out, and they were like going, well, the local rep was going, well, really, it's a CMEX bull because he's a and Toto, which was a prelude.
That's right.
Son out of a Aerostar, which was a CMEX.
And she was from Canada.
And then an Inspiration. So, as far as he was like, well, it's all CMEX. So apparently, he looked at her and was like, And then I'm told then when we had my sale, it made a few people change their breeding plans.
Well, I bet.
Because, it suddenly, it put a bit of a marker out there and people were interested. And let's be honest, genomics allowed the world to be on a bit more of a level playing field, didn't it? It did make a bit of a marker.
But it doesn't matter how far we go, whichever sale I go to, or genomics or whatever it is, cow families are still the most important part. And this is exactly one of the things about our podcast, is that we are speaking about cow families and that kind of thing. And
but you say that, I mean, let's be honest, we both know when genomics came along, it was supposed to broaden the gene pool because we were supposed to find those outlying unknown families.
Precisely.
But it's not done that, has it?
It's not.
It's done the complete opposite. and narrowed things down.
Showed us what we knew was right.
and
Cow families are important.
Yeah, and I remember going to a presentation would have been Worldwide Sires in Melbourne. They'd had their own. It was a staff presentation in the morning, and then a few select farmers, breeders, were invited in the afternoon, and they were looking at ewes. They gave a presentation, and they said, "Oh, based on this, I think it was over the BW Marshalls.
Yeah,
you should be using Oman."
Yeah,
and I'm like, "You what?"
Yeah.
And they're like,
Remember that.
BW Marshalls, you should be using Oman. But I said, "You're using Bell over Bell over Bell."
Yeah.
And because was BW Marshall, wasn't he Bellwood over an Elton?
Bell Elton was in both pedigrees.
Yeah, and it was, or something like, whatever it was, and there was like 3 cross, and they're like, "Oh no," and then I can't remember what the alternative they offered me was, and they said, "Well, no, in that case you should use that," and I'm like, "Well, hold on, he's Bell as well," so you know, it's like, come on, you want something different.
Oman was out of Bell Elton down.
That's right.
So,
yes.
So there's Bell Elton on both sides, plus Bellwood on the one side. They went back.
Right.
Bell.
Yes, that's right. So, but I can't remember what the alternative they offered was to go over the BW Marshalls.
Yeah.
But it was Bell still in the pedigree, and you're like,
That's right.
oh.
That's right.
I mean, I used to be an absolute, I don't know, freak's the right word, but I just used to know my pedigrees off the top of my head without even thinking about it.
Yeah, but the interesting thing that you've just said is that combination, they actually did genomics on it, and they actually took BW Marshall and they took Oman's genomic data, and they showed you why they actually said that. All of the faults that Oman had were strengths in BW.
Yes, they were when you looked at his.
Yes. So it actually married up exactly, and then they tested that progeny, and that's exactly what they came out on. That became a golden cross.
It did, yeah. I mean, I remember someone telling me in North Queensland, it is. If it works, it's line breeding. If it doesn't work, it's inbreeding. But you should put the best over the best. And let's be honest, Raider was inbred. I'm just trying to think who else.
Baldwin.
Yes, and there's a couple of other older bulls. I'm trying to think who they are now, but they were.
Most of them
have got a very closely related
line breeding.
So it does work.
Yeah.
But then they tell us that we're all too inbred. But no, but I mean, saying that Bellwood didn't work well in Australia.
No,
he was too slow in terms of milking speed.
Oh, right.
Milking speed was a big thing in Australia, to the point that someone said to me once there should almost be 2 milking speed proofs, one for herringbone milkers and one for rotary milkers. True. Because someone said to me, so are they slow milkers on the rotary? And you go, well, I don't know. If they're milked out by the time they get round to me, they're fine. It's not a problem. Because in the herringbone, you notice that one that you're waiting for all the time, don't you? But yeah, so, and that was a bit of a concern. I know why a lot of people didn't use Shottle initially in Oz. Was because he was M-Toto, which was known for bad milking speed, out of an Aerostar, bad milking speed, Inspiration, bad milking speed. I mean, she wasn't a slow milker, but she had a lot of milk. Because I remember, was it the recording before the sale? She did 55 litres or something, I think it was.
Yeah,
so, she was
takes
milking.
A while.
Milking speed was definitely a criteria, and they didn't like white cows over there.
No, true. With all that heat,
Well, exactly. Risk of skin cancers, etc.
Yeah, we are getting off the topic.
We are a bit. Yeah.
The slow milking was actually one of the reasons you ended up with low somatic cell scores. So there was very much a balance, wasn't there?
Yeah.
Getting closer to 0, there was probably a better idea than going either extremes.
You're right, because that's it, isn't it? Is the faster milking, animals are usually more prone to a higher cell count because the opening is bigger. And they've got more chance of them getting in. They
release the milk quicker. So they're releasing milk before they get into the parlour.
And it's the happy medium. Like most things, it's the happy medium.
The too slow milking, you can't get the milk out, so you get mastitis. Anyway, right. So then, after all that, you left.
So left Australia, came back here late 2008 for what was supposed to be a holiday. 13 and a half years later, I'm still here. So initially got a job milking cows for somebody not a million miles away from where we're currently sat. Was there for 18 months. And then just decided I had the opportunity, wanted to give it a go to try the other side. I guess I just wasn't happy milking someone else's cows. So started selling semen for somebody and doing other odds and sods around milk recording and just different bits and pieces. Some inseminating for somebody and just different bits and pieces like that.
Mm-hmm.
Then the opportunity came up to work full time for Worldwide Sires, which is obviously where you and I met.
Yeah.
Was them with them for probably 9 months.
Right. Then back into feeding.
Yeah, well, no, it wasn't initially. Then left that, was unemployed for a couple of months, and then started working for somebody selling dairy chemicals. But then they added feed onto their a line of feed onto what they were selling, and I started doing some stuff with that. Then left there after. What was I there? 15, 18 months? I can't remember exactly. And then sort of sat down for a while and thought, what am I going to do? What's missing? And thought, well, actually, I always used to like feeding as much, as my second passion after breeding. And then so okay, what do I need to do? What I need to look for? So then looked at doing the diploma ruminant nutrition up at Harper. So did that initially on my own, and then was approached to provide that support along with other bits and pieces for who I was working for until recently. I was there for 6 years, and when they approached me, I was like, "Yay! I'm getting paid for doing what I enjoy doing." So then, did that for them and was doing other bits and pieces. But obviously, recently decided it's time for a change. Wanted to give this a go because you and I have obviously had this in the back of our minds for a wee while.
For a while.
Give me the opportunity to have the time for it, and then my interest. So I'm doing more and more nutrition. I concentrate on nutrition now, but obviously on top of that, I'm a CowSignals Master and a mobility scorer, and just. If it's cows, I usually talk something about it somewhere along the line. And as much as I still am a black and white man, a good cow's a good cow. Doesn't matter what it is, a good cow's a good cow.
Absolutely.
So really, I don't know what else you want to ask about, but probably about time to end this one.
Right.
So
well, thanks, Andrew. That was again fascinating, and I know we're going to speak quite a lot more into the future about what our experience and what your experience have been, and where you've gone wrong, where you've gone right, what you can actually suggest, and so I look greatly forward to our next one.
No worries. Thank you very much, Neil, and thank you everybody. If you've got any questions, just email them to podcast at ChewintheCud.com, and we'll see what we can do. So thank you very much, everybody.
We'll be back in contact soon.
Yeah, we'll hopefully hear from you. We'll hopefully hear from us again soon. All right.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye.
And now for the really boring bit, I'm afraid, the legal disclaimer. The information provided during this podcast has been prepared for general information purposes only and does not constitute advice. The information must not be relied upon for any purpose, and no representation or warranty is given to its accuracy, completeness, or otherwise. Any reference to other organisations, businesses, or products during this podcast are not endorsements or recommendations of Chewing the Cud Limited. The views of Andrew Jones are personal and may not be the views of Chewing the Cud Limited, and the views of Neil Greggor are personal and may not be the views of Master Gen Limited and any affiliated companies. Thank you for listening, and goodbye.